The great meeting hall of Harmony's Rest space station buzzed with the usual sounds of galactic politics. Hundreds of beings from different worlds filled the curved seats that surrounded the center speaking platform. Some had scales that changed color with their moods. Others floated in special tanks filled with glowing liquid. A few looked almost like giant insects with too many eyes. Council Speaker HFY stood at the center podium. Her crystal body caught the light from the station's artificial suns and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. She had called this meeting to discuss the usual business of running a galaxy. Trade routes needed approval. New colonies wanted permission to expand. There were disputes about mining rights in the outer systems. But something felt wrong. Ambassador Krenvol of the Hegemony noticed it first. His 4 eyes scanned the meeting hall as he adjusted his ceremonial armor. The humans were not there. In 300 years, the human delegation had never missed a council meeting without sending word ahead of time. "Where are our human colleagues?" he asked in his deep, rumbling voice. "Are they too busy playing with their simple machines to attend important galactic business?" A few other delegates laughed. The humans were often seen as strange by the other species. They were emotional where others were logical. They cared about things that seemed unimportant to more advanced civilizations. Many council members saw them as useful but primitive. The ethereal communion representative, a being of pure energy contained in a floating sphere, pulsed with amused light. Perhaps their biological processes have overwhelmed their judgment again. They are so ruled by feelings instead of pure thought. The machine collective's delegate, a collection of silver cubes that formed different shapes when it spoke, clicked and whirred. "Inefficient organisms often malfunction. We should proceed without them." Speaker HFY tried to contact the human embassy on the station. No response. She sent messages to Earth. Nothing came back. Growing worried, she ordered deep space scanners to check on human space. The meeting continued without the humans. They discussed the Savage Worlds program, which kept primitive species locked in certain parts of the galaxy. These beings were considered too dangerous or too simple to join galactic civilization. Force fields kept them contained while the Council studied them and slowly took their resources. The humans had always argued against this program. They said it was wrong to cage entire civilizations. They claimed these beings deserved freedom and respect. But the humans were always outvoted. The other species saw their objections as proof of their emotional weakness. Ambassador Krenvol stood to speak about expanding the Savage Worlds program. "We have identified 17 new primitive species in the Outer Rim. I propose we contain them before they can spread their violent ways to civilized space." The vote was unanimous, as it always was when the humans weren't there to object. Hours passed. The Council approved new mining operations that would strip entire moons bare. They agreed to redirect food shipments away from struggling colonies to more profitable markets. They voted to increase military patrols in areas where lesser species might try to develop faster than light travel. All routine business. All things the humans would have fought against. All things that passed easily without their annoying moral objections. Then Communications Officer Teldana burst into the chamber. Her tentacles were bright red with stress, a sign of extreme agitation in her species. "Speaker HFY," she called out, her voice shaking. "We have a problem. A very big problem." The crystal being's body flickered with concern. "What is it, Officer Teldana?" "The humans, Speaker. All of them. They're gone." The meeting hall fell silent. Even the constant humming of the station's life support system seemed to pause. "Gone?" Ambassador Krenvol demanded. "What do you mean, gone?" Teldana's tentacles writhed as she accessed her datapad. "Every human world, every human space station, every human ship. They've all gone dark. No communications, no distress signals, no responses to our calls." "Technical difficulties," suggested the machine collective delegate. "Their primitive communication systems have failed." "No," Teldana said, her voice getting smaller. "I sent probe ships to check. The worlds are still there. The cities are still there. The space stations are still running. But there are no humans anywhere." Speaker HFY's crystal body dimmed. "How many humans are we talking about?" 12 billion, Speaker, across 400 worlds and thousands of space installations. The number hung in the air like a heavy weight. 12 billion beings don't just disappear. "Pirates?" suggested someone from the back of the chamber. "Impossible," Teldana replied. "There are no signs of fighting. No damage to any structures. The humans' automated systems are still working perfectly. Their ships are still in orbit around their planets, but empty. It's like they all just left. The ethereal communion's energy sphere pulsed with confusion. Mass migration of an entire species is unprecedented. Where could they have gone? More importantly, Ambassador Krenval said, his voice taking on a threatening tone, why didn't they tell us they were leaving? The question echoed through the chamber. For 3 centuries, humans had been part of the Galactic Council. They had contributed to every major decision, even when their contributions were ignored or overruled. They had built homes on council worlds, formed friendships with other species, created families that spanned multiple star systems. Speaker Zeftai ordered a complete investigation. Deep space scanners swept the galaxy looking for any trace of human activity. Probe ships were sent to every human world to search for clues. Communication arrays broadcast messages in every human language, begging for a response. The investigation took days. When the reports came back, they painted an impossible picture. Every human settlement showed signs of careful preparation. Cities had been cleaned and organized. Power systems were left running on automatic maintenance cycles. Food stores were sealed and preserved. Libraries and museums had been carefully archived and protected. The humans hadn't fled in panic. They had planned this exodus for years, maybe decades. Every detail had been thought through. Every system had been designed to run without human supervision. Most disturbing of all, they had left behind instruction manuals. Detailed guides on how to maintain the systems they had built or improved over the centuries. But the guides were written in a way that suggested the humans never intended to return. They didn't just leave, Teldana reported to an emergency council session 3 days later. They said goodbye to everything. They prepared their worlds like museums, preserving their culture but making it clear they were done with it. Ambassador Krenval slammed his armored fist on his desk. This is treachery. They have abandoned their obligations to the council. We should send the fleet to find them and drag them back. Find them where? Asked the Machine Collective delegate. They have vanished as completely as if they never existed. Speaker Zeftai stood at her podium, her crystal body reflecting the worried faces around her. For the first time in her long life, she felt truly uncertain. The humans had been annoying, yes. Emotional and inefficient, certainly. But they had also been stable, reliable, always there to object when things went too far, always ready to offer solutions when problems arose. Now they were gone, and the galaxy suddenly felt much larger and much emptier than it had just a week before. Outside the station's windows, the stars shone as they always had. But somehow the light seemed a little dimmer. The galaxy was still there, still full of wonders and possibilities. But something essential had changed. The humans had departed quietly without anger or threats or demands. They had simply chosen to leave. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the Galactic Council was forced to wonder if they had done something terribly wrong. The meeting ended without any real decisions. How do you plan for the disappearance of an entire species? How do you replace 12 billion beings who had woven themselves into the fabric of galactic civilization? As the delegates filed out of the chamber, each returning to their own worlds with more questions than answers, none of them realized that their problems were just beginning. The humans had been far more important to the running of the galaxy than anyone had understood. And very soon, the council would start to learn exactly how much they had lost. 3 months after the humans vanished, the first real problem started. Mining Director Vextel of the Draxian Consortium stood in his office high above the Kepler station asteroid fields. Through the transparent steel windows, he could see dozens of massive mining ships hovering around floating rocks the size of small moons. But something was wrong with the picture. The ships were moving too slowly. The extraction beams kept shutting down, and his profit report showed numbers that made his scaled skin turn pale green with worry. 60% efficiency, he muttered, staring at his datapad. How is that possible? His assistant, a nervous Veltar with large eyes and furry hands, shifted uncomfortably. Sir, it's the extraction systems. The ones the humans modified for us 5 years ago. The work crews can't figure out how to operate them properly. Vextal's claws clicked against his desk. They're just mining machines. Point them at rock, pull out metals. How complicated can it be? Very complicated, sir, the assistant squeaked. The humans did something to the old equipment that tripled our output. But they never taught anyone else how their modifications work. Our engineers are afraid to touch anything because they might break it completely. This was happening all across Council space. Systems that had worked perfectly for years were starting to fail, and nobody understood why. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, cargo ships sat in long lines waiting for permission to dock. Shipmaster Kalek of the Ethereal Communion had been stuck in orbit for 6 days, watching his crew of living energy beings grow dimmer with frustration. The docking computer system that managed traffic for the entire planet had developed what the port authorities called calculation errors. Ships that should have been cleared for landing were being sent to empty docks on the other side of the planet. Cargo meant for the outer rim was being routed to core worlds. Food shipments were arriving at industrial planets while factory equipment was delivered to agricultural colonies. The humans wrote the traffic management software, the portmaster explained. When Kalek finally reached him by communication beam, "We always thought it was just a simple routing program. Turns out they had built in thousands of small adjustments that we never noticed. Without those adjustments, everything falls apart." Similar problems were showing up everywhere. On the core world of synthesis, climate control systems that had maintained perfect weather for decades began creating storms that turned the sky purple and made the rain burn skin. The Synthesis Collective's best engineers discovered that human atmospheric specialists had made tiny changes to the planet's weather machines. Changes that prevented a dozen different types of atmospheric poisoning that nobody else had even known were possible. The food processing centers on 3 different worlds suddenly started producing nutrition paste that met basic caloric needs but lacked essential vitamins. Veltar colonies reported the first cases of malnutrition they had seen in 2 centuries. When technicians examined the automated kitchens, they found human-designed dietary analysis programs that had been quietly ensuring perfect nutrition for millions of beings. But the most frightening problems were happening in the Savage World's containment. Area's Commander Zeklos of the Hegemony Defense Force received the first emergency report while reviewing patrol schedules at his command post. His scarred face, marked by battles against primitive species that had tried to break free from their designated areas, darkened as he read the message. "Force field generator malfunction in Sector 7, his communication officer reported. "The barriers containing the Korath species have been fluctuating for the past week." Zeklos pulled up the tactical display. The Korath were one of the species classified as savage by the Council. They lived on 12 worlds in a small star cluster, surrounded by invisible force fields that prevented them from leaving their solar system. The fields also blocked advanced technology from reaching them, keeping them at a primitive level of development. "What kind of malfunction?" Zeklos demanded. "Unknown, sir. The barriers keep shutting down for a few minutes at a time, then restarting. Our technicians can't figure out what's causing it." This was bad news. The Korath had tried to break free from their containment several times over the past century. They were aggressive, warlike, and held grudges for generations. If they discovered the barriers were failing, they might try to escape again. "Send a repair team immediately," Zeklos ordered, "and double the patrol ships in that sector." But when the repair team arrived, they found something that made their blood run cold. The force field generators were working perfectly. All the mechanical systems were functioning within normal parameters. The problem was with the control software. "Sir," the lead technician reported back to Zeklos, "the containment system is controlled by a network of human-designed computer programs. They're incredibly complex. The humans told us they were just monitoring and maintenance routines, but they're actually managing thousands of different variables we never knew existed." Zeklos felt his stomach sink. "Are you telling me the humans were running our containment systems?" "Not running them, sir, but their programs were constantly making tiny adjustments to keep everything stable. Without those adjustments, the whole system is starting to break down." Reports started flooding in from other containment areas. The barriers around the Thekron worlds were experiencing power fluctuations. The monitoring stations watching the militant Vorash species had gone offline. Patrol routes that had kept dangerous species contained for decades were becoming random and ineffective. Council Speaker Zeftai called another emergency session. The Great Chamber buzzed with worried voices as delegates shared similar reports from their own territories. Systems that had worked flawlessly for years were failing in small but critical ways. "How did we not know about this?" demanded Ambassador Krenval. His usual confidence was cracking. 3 hegemony worlds were dealing with broken environmental systems, and his own people were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about their dependence on human technology. The Machine Collective delegate reformed its shape into something that suggested confusion. Analysis indicates human involvement in approximately 78% of critical galactic infrastructure. This was not apparent in routine operations. Because they never made it apparent, said Teldana, who had been promoted to Chief of Galactic Communications after the humans' disappearance. I've been reviewing communication logs from the past 50 years. The humans rarely took credit for their work. They would offer suggestions, make improvements, then step back and let others take the recognition. Speaker Zeftai's crystal body flickered with growing concern. Give us examples. Teldana's tentacles danced over her data pad. The atmospheric poisoning prevented on synthesis. The dietary deficiencies corrected on Veltar colonies. The trade route optimizations that prevented resource wars between the hegemony and the quantum shepherds. In every case, humans identified problems that nobody else had noticed and fixed them quietly. The ethereal communion representative pulsed with what might have been embarrassment. We assumed our superior intellects would have detected any serious issues. The humans made us feel superior, Teldana continued. They would present their solutions as minor suggestions or emotional concerns. They made it easy for us to believe we were the advanced ones while they did the actual work of keeping civilization running. A new delegate stood up. Threshak of the Machine Collective had been running probability calculations since the humans disappeared. His mechanical voice carried an unusual note of what almost sounded like respect. Additional analysis suggests the human departure was not random, he announced. Examination of failing systems indicates deliberate design. The humans arranged for their absence to reveal our dependencies gradually, in non-fatal ways. The chamber fell silent. What Threshak was suggesting was almost unthinkable. You're saying they planned this? Ambassador Krenvol's voice was barely controlled. They deliberately sabotaged galactic civilization? Negative, Threshak replied. They designed systems to reveal truth. We assumed their contributions were minimal because they allowed us to believe so. Their departure forces recognition of reality. Speaker Zeftai looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had ruled the galaxy for centuries. For the first time, many of them looked uncertain, even frightened. Outside the station, the galaxy continued to spin. Trade ships struggled with broken navigation systems. Colonies dealt with failing life support. Containment barriers flickered around worlds full of beings who had been locked away and forgotten. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, 12 billion humans watched and waited to see what their former allies would do with the truth they were finally being forced to face. The emergency session had been called at the highest level of security. Council Speaker Zeftai stood before a chamber filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Defense ministers, trade administrators, scientific directors, and intelligence chiefs had all gathered to discuss what was becoming known as the human problem. 6 months had passed since humanity's disappearance. What had started as minor inconveniences had grown into civilization-threatening disasters. Whole sectors of space were dealing with cascade failures as one system after another broke down. We need access to the classified archives, Speaker Zeftai announced. Everything related to human activities for the past 3 centuries. We must understand exactly what they were doing. Ambassador Krenvol shifted uncomfortably in his ceremonial armor. Speaker, those archives contain sensitive information about Council operations. Are we certain we want to open them to general review? We are certain we have no choice, Zeftai replied firmly. Authorization granted. Full disclosure. The data that came flooding out of the classified systems painted a picture that nobody had expected. For 300 years, while the Council believed they were generously allowing a primitive species to participate in galactic civilization, the humans had been quietly holding that civilization together. Teldana stood to present the findings, her tentacles pale with shock. The archives show systematic human intervention in every major crisis of the past 3 centuries. The plague that threatened to wipe out the Synthesis Collective in 2387, human doctors developed the cure but let collective scientists take credit. The resource war between the hegemony and the ethereal communion in 2401. Human economists created a trading algorithm that made the war pointless, but presented it as a routine efficiency improvement. She accessed another file. The atmospheric disaster on New Veltar in 2445. Human engineers redesigned the terraforming systems but told everyone they were just making minor adjustments. 17 potential extinction events. 17 times the humans saved entire species from destruction, and 17 times they let others take the credit. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. These were disasters that most delegates didn't even remember as disasters. They remembered them as problems that had been solved by their own brilliant scientists and engineers. Intelligence Chief Mordak of the Quantum Shepherds accessed his own classified files. His usually calm voice carried a note of disbelief. The humans had monitoring stations throughout Council space. Not spy satellites. Medical monitoring stations. They were tracking disease patterns, atmospheric changes, psychological stress indicators in entire populations. They knew about problems before the problems even manifested. That's impossible, scoffed Science Director Velmak of the Machine Collective. Our own sensors would have detected systematic surveillance. They hid them in plain sight, Mordak replied. Weather monitoring stations, communication relays, navigation beacons. Every piece of infrastructure they helped us build contained hidden sensors that watched for signs of trouble. The most shocking revelation came when they examined the archives related to the Savage Worlds program. For 2 centuries, the Council had maintained containment barriers around primitive species, telling themselves they were protecting galactic civilization from dangerous influences. Defense Minister Stakron of the Hegemony accessed the military files with growing horror. The containment systems? They're not pointing inward. The force fields, the monitoring stations, the patrol routes. They're all designed to keep Council species out of the Savage Worlds, not to keep the contained species in. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Speaker Zeftai's crystal body flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Are you saying the humans were protecting the contained species from us? The evidence is clear, Stakron replied, his voice hollow. Every containment system has secondary functions that prevent unauthorized access by Council forces. The humans were monitoring our communications. They knew about plans to exploit, enslave, or exterminate the restricted species. The barriers weren't prisons. They were shields. Teldana pulled up another set of files, her tentacles now trembling. There's more. The humans maintained secret communication networks with many of the contained species. They were providing medical aid, agricultural technology, educational resources, all disguised as natural developments or fortunate accidents. The ethereal communion representative pulsed with what could only be described as shame. The Korath technological advancement that we attributed to evolutionary luck? Human engineering textbooks delivered through fake meteorite crashes, Teldana confirmed. The Thekron resistance to the Red Death Plague? Human vaccines introduced through modified food supplies. The Varash ability to predict solar storms? Human early warning systems, disguised as religious visions. Council member Threshak of the Machine Collective had been running calculations throughout the presentation. His mechanical voice carried an unusual note of what almost sounded like admiration. Statistical analysis confirmed systematic pattern. Humans prevented approximately 437 potential atrocities by Council forces over 3 centuries. Methods included infrastructure sabotage, information warfare, economic manipulation, and direct intervention. The numbers were staggering. For 300 years, the Council had unknowingly been prevented from becoming the very evil they claimed to oppose. Every time a member species had proposed enslaving a primitive civilization, their ships had experienced mysterious technical failures. Every time someone had suggested strip mining a populated world, their economic projections had somehow failed to show profit. Every time the Council had moved toward genocide, circumstances had mysteriously aligned to make such actions impossible or pointless. They were managing us, whispered Science Director Velmak, like we were the primitive species that needed containment. Ambassador Krenvol stood abruptly, his 4 eyes blazing with rage. This is treachery of the highest order. They made fools of us for centuries. Did they? Asked a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. Council member Lyra Esch of the Quantum Shepherds rarely spoke in large gatherings, but when she did, others listened. Or did they prevent us from becoming the fools we seemed determined to become? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lyra Esch continued, her voice steady and calm. Every action described in these archives prevented suffering. Every intervention saved lives. Every deception protected the innocent. If this is treachery, what does that make us? The uncomfortable truth was settling over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The humans hadn't manipulated the Council for personal gain or species advantage. They had manipulated the Council to prevent atrocities. They had made themselves the secret conscience of galactic civilization. The Savage Worlds program, Lyra Esch continued. We told ourselves it was for the protection of galactic civilization. But the archives show our real plans: strip mining, biological experimentation, slave labor. The humans didn't just prevent these crimes. They made us believe we were noble for restraining ourselves. Speaker Zeftai looked around the chamber at faces that showed a mixture of shame, anger, and confusion. The question we must ask ourselves is not why the humans did this. The question is why they had to. Tildana accessed one final file. There's a message here, hidden in the communication archives, dated just before the humans disappeared. She read aloud in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. We came to you as students, hoping to learn wisdom from older, more advanced civilizations. Instead, we found that technological advancement and moral advancement are not the same thing. For 3 centuries, we have tried to guide you toward the light you claim to represent. We have failed. We cannot force you to be better than you choose to be. We can only refuse to enable your choice to be worse. Find your own path to wisdom, or accept the consequences of remaining on the path you have chosen. The message was signed with a simple phrase: with hope for your eventual enlightenment. Humanity. The chamber fell into complete silence. Outside the station, the galaxy continued its eternal dance of stars and worlds. But inside the great meeting hall of Harmony's Rest, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in the darkness of a truth they had never wanted to face. They were not the wise, benevolent rulers they had believed themselves to be. They were children playing with weapons too dangerous for their level of maturity, and their patient teachers had finally given up and walked away. Admiral Sector of the Hegemony Defense Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching 200 of the most advanced ships in the galaxy prepare for the largest search operation in Council history. His scarred face reflected the cold light of distant stars as he reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Find the humans, the Council had ordered. Bring them back, whatever it takes. The Admiral didn't like admissions of weakness, but the truth was undeniable. Without humanity's hidden support, galactic civilization was collapsing. Trade networks had broken down completely. Medical systems were failing across dozens of worlds. The containment barriers around the savage worlds were flickering on and off like dying lights. Most dangerous of all, the Council species were starting to turn on each other. With their infrastructure crumbling and their economies failing, ancient grudges were surfacing. The ethereal communion blamed the hegemony for driving away their moral guidance. The machine collective calculated that some species would need to be sacrificed to maintain overall system stability. War was becoming a very real possibility. Admiral, his communication officer reported, the search fleet is ready to depart. 200 ships equipped with the most sensitive scanners we've ever built. If the humans are out there, we'll find them. Admiral Sector nodded grimly. Begin the search. Start with the nearest star systems and work outward. Check every planet, every asteroid, every speck of dust in space. They have to be somewhere. The search began with hope and determination. Surely an entire species couldn't just vanish without leaving some trace. 12 billion beings required massive resources to survive. They would need worlds to live on, ships to travel in, infrastructure to support their civilization. But as the weeks passed, that hope began to fade. The search teams found human settlements on hundreds of worlds, cities that had been carefully shut down and preserved, space stations that continued to orbit their planets in perfect formation, ships that sat in neat rows in orbital harbors, their engines cold but their systems still humming with automated maintenance routines. What they didn't find was any trace of where the humans had gone. It's like they evaporated, reported Captain Velthok from the Outer Rim Search Zone. We've checked every world in this sector. The human colonies are all intact but empty. No signs of violence, no evidence of hasty evacuation. They just left. Each abandoned world told the same story. The humans had prepared for their departure over many years. Buildings had been sealed and protected. Power systems had been designed to run automatically for centuries. Most disturbing of all, they had left behind museums. Every human world contained carefully preserved exhibitions of human culture, history, and achievements. Art galleries displayed paintings and sculptures from across their history. Libraries contained every book ever written in any human language. Music halls held recordings of symphonies and songs from hundreds of different human cultures. But these weren't the desperate preparations of refugees. They were the careful arrangements of a people who wanted to be remembered, but had no intention of returning. Dr. Zintar, the Council's chief archaeologist, examined the cultural sites on New Earth Prime. Her 6 arms moved gracefully as she catalogued artifacts that spanned thousands of years of human development. "These displays are perfect," she reported to Admiral Sector. "Every piece has been cleaned, catalogued, and preserved. The humans didn't just abandon their worlds. They turned them into monuments to their own civilization. The search expanded beyond human space into the deep void between galaxies. If humanity had fled, they would need enormous resources to survive in the emptiness between star systems. But the scanners found nothing. No heat signatures, no energy readings, no evidence that anyone had ever passed through the cosmic darkness. Strange reports began coming from the search teams. On the edges of known space, they detected signs that someone else was looking for the humans too. Ship wakes in the cosmic dust suggested that other vessels had passed through recently. Energy signatures that didn't match any known Council technology. "Sir," reported Commander Thakris from Search Group 7, "we found evidence of non-Council ships in Sector 23. The energy patterns are primitive, very primitive." Admiral Sector felt his blood run cold. "How primitive?" "Pre-industrial, sir. Maybe early spaceflight technology, but the numbers are wrong. We're seeing evidence of hundreds of ships all traveling together in some kind of convoy formation." The implications were staggering. The savage world species, the primitive civilizations that the Council had contained for centuries, were somehow mounting their own search operations. They were looking for the humans too. Intelligence reports confirmed the worst fears. The Korath had launched 17 expeditions into deep space, using ships that shouldn't have been able to leave their solar system. The Thekron had sent out search parties with technology that was supposed to be centuries beyond their development level. Even the supposedly violent Vorash were peacefully coordinating with other contained species in massive search efforts. How are they doing this? Admiral Sector demanded during a secure communication with Council headquarters. Their containment barriers are still partially functional. They shouldn't have access to interstellar travel. Speaker Zeftai's crystal form flickered with worry. The barriers were never about preventing them from leaving, Admiral. They were about preventing us from entering. The humans made sure these species could escape if they needed to. The truth was becoming clear. The primitive species weren't looking for the humans as conquerors or enemies. They were searching for their protectors. They knew something the Council was only beginning to understand. Humanity had been their shield against galactic civilization for centuries. As the search continued into its 3rd month, the messages began appearing. The first one was found on an abandoned monitoring station in deep space. A simple text message in basic galactic common language. "We have not gone far. We are watching. When you are ready to be worthy of the trust we once placed in you, signal us on the old emergency frequencies." More messages turned up on communication relays throughout Council space, all saying essentially the same thing. The humans were still out there, still monitoring galactic events, still waiting. But they were waiting for something specific. The search teams tried broadcasting on every known frequency, sending messages of apology, promises of change, pleas for humanity to return and help fix the crumbling infrastructure. But there were no responses. The humans were listening, but they weren't ready to talk. Admiral Sector found the most disturbing message on his own flagship's communication array. It had been placed there without triggering any security systems, appearing as if it had materialized from thin air. The message was addressed to him personally. "Admiral," it read, "you are a good soldier following orders from leaders who have forgotten what leadership means. The choice before your people is simple. Learn to be worthy of the stars you claim to rule, or accept the consequences of remaining unworthy. Your search fleet is impressive, but it will not find us until we choose to be found. We suggest you use your resources to search for wisdom instead." The message was signed with coordinates to a small, unremarkable star system on the edge of Council space. When the Admiral sent a ship to investigate, they found something that changed everything. It was a human colony ship. Not abandoned like all the others, but still occupied. A single ship with a crew of 50 humans who had volunteered to stay behind as observers. They made no attempt to hide or flee when the Council ships arrived. The message they delivered was simple and final. We are willing to return when you have proven you can govern without destroying. Until then, we will remain in the deep places between the stars, protecting those who cannot protect themselves and waiting for you to grow into the beings you have the potential to become. The search operation was called off the next day. There was no point in continuing. The humans would not be found until they wanted to be found, and they had made it clear that they were waiting for something the Council had never learned to give, wisdom worthy of the power they wielded. Admiral Sector returned to Council space with 200 ships and a message that shook the foundations of galactic civilization. The humans weren't lost. They were waiting. And the choice of what they were waiting for lay entirely in the hands of those they had left behind. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced its darkest hour. The great meeting chamber of Harmony's Rest was packed with delegates, but the atmosphere was unlike anything in the station's 300-year history. Instead of the usual diplomatic politeness, raw emotions filled the air. Fear, anger, desperation, and something else that few council members had ever experienced. Genuine shame. Speaker Zeftai stood at the center podium, her crystal body reflecting the stress that radiated from every being in the chamber. Infrastructure failures had reached critical levels across the galaxy. The hegemony was dealing with atmospheric poisoning on 12 worlds. The Veltar Republic was facing famine as food production systems continued to break down. The ethereal communion was losing entire colonies to plague as medical systems failed without human oversight. Most terrifying of all, the savage world's containment barriers had finally collapsed completely. For the first time in centuries, the primitive species were free to travel throughout the galaxy. Everyone expected violence, invasion, revenge. Instead, something far more disturbing was happening. The freed species were offering help. Order, Speaker Zeftai called, though her voice lacked its usual authority. We are here to decide the future of galactic civilization. All members will have a chance to speak. Ambassador Krenvil was the first to stand. His ceremonial armor was tarnished now, reflecting the decline of the hegemony's power. 1 year ago, we were the masters of a galaxy. Today, we are beggars dependent on the charity of species we considered beneath us. This is the humans' fault. They abandoned their responsibilities and left us to fail. I say we use our remaining military strength to force their return. A murmur of agreement came from several delegates, but it was weaker than it would have been months earlier. Everyone knew the military option was largely meaningless. The search fleets had proven that the humans couldn't be found unless they wanted to be. Science Director Velmak of the Machine Collective reformed his shape into something suggesting cold logic. Military action is inefficient. Analysis suggests adaptation to new reality. We should restructure civilization without human dependency. Accept calculated losses of non-essential populations and focus resources on core worlds. The casual mention of calculated losses sent a chill through the chamber. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had driven the humans away in the first place. But then a third voice spoke up, and the chamber fell silent. Council member Lyra Esch of the Quantum Shepherds had rarely participated in major debates, but over the past year she had become an unexpected voice of moral clarity. Her species was known for their patience and long-term thinking, qualities that had served her well as the crisis deepened. Honored colleagues, she began, her voice calm but carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber. We have spent this year asking the wrong question. We have asked how to bring the humans back, how to replace what they did for us, how to continue as we were. But the real question is simpler. Do we want to become worthy of the trust they once placed in us? Ambassador Krenvol's four eyes narrowed. Worthy? We are the advanced civilizations of this galaxy. We have technology that spans star systems, knowledge that encompasses entire sciences. And what have we done with that advancement? Lyra Esch replied. We used it to imprison entire species because we found them inconvenient. We planned to strip their worlds bare and enslave their populations. When the humans tried to guide us toward better choices, we ignored them because their suggestions threatened our comfortable certainties. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Lyra Esch continued speaking, her words cutting through the chaos. The Korath are offering to help repair our atmospheric processors. The Thekron are sharing medical knowledge that could save millions of lives. The Vorash are providing food to worlds that are starving. These are the species we called savage and primitive. They are showing us more wisdom and compassion than we have shown in centuries. Teldana, who had been monitoring communications throughout the galaxy, stood to support Lyra Asha's words. It's true. The freed species are not taking revenge. They're trying to help, and they're using technology and knowledge that the humans secretly shared with them over the centuries. Technology that we denied them access to. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been keeping these species contained and primitive, the humans had been secretly educating them, sharing knowledge, preparing them for eventual freedom. The savage species were now more advanced than the Council had realized, and they were using that advancement to help rather than to hurt. Intelligence Chief Mordak accessed his data files with shaking hands. The communications we've intercepted from the freed worlds show no plans for conquest or revenge. They're coordinating massive relief efforts for failing Council worlds. They're sharing resources freely. They're acting like the civilization we always claimed to be. The weight of that truth settled over the chamber like a physical force. The species they had imprisoned and looked down upon were demonstrating the moral advancement that the Council lacked. Speaker Zeftai's crystal body flickered rapidly as she processed the full scope of what they were facing. Are you suggesting we change? Completely restructure our civilization? I'm suggesting we become what we always said we were, Lyra Esh replied. A council of species working together for mutual benefit, not a collection of bullies keeping others down to maintain our own superiority. The debate that followed was unlike anything in council history. For the first time, delegates spoke honestly about their fears, their prejudices, their willingness to sacrifice others for their own comfort. Some admitted they had known the Savage Worlds program was wrong, but had supported it anyway because it was profitable. Others confessed they had resented the humans' moral objections, because those objections made them feel guilty about their choices. The Machine Collective delegate ran probability calculations and announced that genuine cooperation with the freed species would actually increase overall system efficiency by 37%. The ethereal communion admitted that their superior intellect had been a comfortable lie that prevented them from acknowledging the wisdom of supposedly primitive beings. As the hours passed, 3 distinct factions emerged in the chamber. The first faction, led by Ambassador Krenvol, still advocated for military action. They wanted to recapture the escaped species, force the humans to return, and restore the old order by whatever means necessary. The second faction, supported by the Machine Collective, proposed cutting losses and abandoning the failing systems. They would concentrate on core worlds and let the peripheral areas collapse, accepting massive casualties as the price of maintaining their own comfort. The third faction, growing larger as the debate continued, supported Lyra Esh's proposal for genuine change. They wanted to dismantle the old system completely and build something new based on cooperation and mutual respect. As the debate reached its climax, Teldana announced that she had received an incoming message on the old emergency frequencies. The chamber fell silent as she played the transmission. It was a human voice speaking in the calm, patient tone that so many council members remembered from years of ignored advice. "We have been watching your debates with interest," the voice said. "For the first time in centuries, you are asking the right questions. The choice before you is simple but not easy. You can try to restore the old system and fail, because it was built on foundations of sand. You can abandon the struggling and weak to save yourselves and become the evil you always had the potential to be, or you can choose to build something worthy of the stars you inhabit." The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something that might have been hope in the words. "We have not gone far. We have been protecting those who cannot protect themselves and preparing for the day when you might be ready to join us in that work. The freed species have shown you what civilization truly looks like. The question now is whether you will learn from their example." The message ended with coordinates and a simple statement. "When you have proven you can govern without destroying, signal us here. We will be waiting." The vote that followed was the closest in council history. The old guard fought desperately to maintain their power and privilege. But in the end, by a margin of just 12 votes, the council chose change. The Savage Worlds program was officially abolished. The containment barriers were permanently dismantled. Trade agreements were restructured to benefit all parties equally. Resources were shared rather than hoarded. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council began to resemble the noble alliance it had always claimed to be. The transformation wasn't immediate or perfect. Some species left the Council rather than accept equality with their former prisoners. Others struggled with concepts like voluntary cooperation and genuine respect for different ways of life. There were mistakes, setbacks, and moments when the old ways seemed easier. But slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change, and on the edge of known space, a single human ship decloaked long enough to deliver medical supplies to a plague-stricken world that the Council had finally voted to help rather than exploit. The ship's captain transmitted a simple message before disappearing back into the void.